Snakes are most commonly found out in nature, and they come in a wide variety of sizes, colors, and dangerousness with their venom and such. But today we're taking a look at the snake that slithered all the way out of nature's grasp and into becoming a powerful yet benevolent deity. So stick around. I started out by rolling my armature wire into a good amount of aluminum foil, and after a while I had made myself a really nice looking silver cigar. Since you can't sculpt without clay, I was happily surprised to find out that I actually had some left, because I hadn't checked before and, well, you know how it is. You sometimes... okay, whoa, that was close. Sometimes the most important things in life are so easy to forget, like removing a sharp knife blade so you don't accidentally start removing your fingers. Once the grey clay had been rolled out into a really flat banana, then I added the thin silver cigar and they lived happily ever after. Actually, that's a lie. My bulletproof plan appeared to have been flawed. I don't know how it happened, but I had to start over, and this time I went about my business quite differently, using that old roller thing I rolled like my life depended on it. Then it was time to reshape our snake to be, effectively removing all the smoothness that I had worked so hard to achieve. But I'm not angry about it, you know, sometimes it helps to just yell f***. Now that's better. After I had added some more clay to the snake and also regaining some control of the smoothness, then it was time to make a head. And even though my favorite snake is the Malagasy leaf-nosed snake, I decided to curb my desire to give NEHEBKAU a really long nose face and just give him a regular old snake face. And speaking of snake face, I mean NEHEBKAU. You might be asking yourself, what is NEHEBKAU? NEHEBKAU was a primordial snake god in ancient Egyptian mythology. Although originally considered an evil spirit, he later functions as a funerary god associated with the afterlife. So if I hadn't stumbled across this meme, I surely wouldn't be sitting here today adding commentary on a video where I sculpt NEHEBKAU. So, thank you, meme. Maybe I'm just bad at the internet, but I couldn't find the correct anatomical name of the thing that I'm sculpting right now, so I will just call them the mouth side parts, or something like that. Then it was time to make some eyes. And some nostrils, which I'm not quite sure why snakes have. I mean, they smell with their tongue. Maybe it's just an aesthetic thing. Even though in every depiction of NEHEBKAU that I have ever seen, he has his mouth closed, but I would be surprised if he doesn't have two really big snake chompers hiding in there, so of course we're gonna give him that. No snake is complete without their iconic forked tongue, and with that in place, the face was done. Since I didn't want to spend the better half of my adult life sculpting rhombuses on a clay snake's back, I used this homemade texture poking thing to make my life a bit more easy. I felt like I had to draw the line somewhere, and this time I really did that. I drew, or more like sculpted the line several times on the underside. Then it was time to give the snake some legs, but first a musical interlude. When the snake had baked in the oven for 30 minutes, then I drilled some holes where I could attach some armature wires that I later on would sculpt some legs on. Of course, there was no way that I was gonna give NEHEBKAU some thin twig legs. NEHEBKAU is a god, and with that comes much responsibility and a lot of weight on his shoulders. Unfortunately, he doesn't have any shoulders, but a good set of bodybuilder log legs can carry a lot of weight as well. The legs were looking great, but something's missing. Ah, that's right, the walkers. It doesn't matter how strong your legs are, if you don't have any feet then you're not going anywhere as well. So, of course, feet were given. After the feet had been attached to the legs, then I added a couple of other small details, such as the fotknöl, as we say in Sweden. When the sculpting process was done, and it was time to make a base that NEHEBKAU could stand on. The idea was to make a round desert-looking base, so I grabbed some XPS foam and traced a circle around a really big tea mug. With a great amount of determination to complete this difficult task ahead of me, I grabbed the sharpest knife that I could find and I cut out the circle. However, as you can see, the circle is not yet circly enough, and even though my knowledge of geometry is quite limited, I was still able to communicate the task at hand to the part of my brain that deals with math problems. And that part of my brain and I, well, we're not best friends to say the least, but together we made this half-decent looking circle out of a square. I glued on some smaller pieces of XPS foam to the base. That way I would get some natural highs and lows, making the desert look a bit less like a pancake and more like a sand cake. Unfortunately, I didn't have any hobby sand, but instead I found this lemon black pepper spice, and when I looked at the expiration date, I got nostalgic. But since my crippling climate guilt wouldn't allow me to just throw it away, I decided to make the best of the situation. So I just peppered that shit on. Nice and good, like there was no tomorrow. And even though the spice had expired half a decade ago, the smell was still so vibrant and pungent that I just couldn't help myself but keep adding layer after layer after layer after layer until the entire bottle was empty. And when that was done, well, then it was time to paint. I started by covering the NEHEBKAU with an off-white base coat from top to bottom. Then the mouth and all the associated mouth parts got painted with a nice red purplish color, before highlights of bright pink and baby blue were added to make it look really nasty. The belly and legs got a base coat of a color I like to call cigarette brown. There's something about this color next to the white base coat that makes me want to fall back into old patterns and give up on my tobacco and nicotine-free life to actually feel something again. And on that happy note, it was time to start painting the snake a bit more green. In order to make the transition between the off-white and the light green a bit smoother, I glazed in a couple of layers of really watered down paint. The last and the darkest layer of green were added as a thin stripe across the back, starting from the head all the way back to the end of the tail. And then the beautiful ball pattern across NEHEBKAU's back was painted, one ball at a time. NEHEBKAU was starting to look good, but there was still some work to do. Ancient Egyptian art is some of the most beautiful in my opinion, and since we're painting an Egyptian god, I wanted to try and celebrate that style in some way. Something that strikes me about it are the bold lines usually painted around the subjects, and also the lack of highlights. So I painted the shadow areas to be in a quite stark contrast to the midtones, and I also tried to keep the highlights to a minimum. Lastly, I painted NEHEBKAU's eyes yellow, followed by a red iris with a pupil that was just a black line. I'm actually really happy with the way NEHEBKAU turned out. Then it was time to paint the base. Painting the base was pretty much as straightforward as it gets. I started by covering the entire thing in a quite drab looking yellow, and then the process were to simply start dry brushing a couple of layers of beige that progressively would get lighter and lighter, applied on smaller and smaller areas. The final and brightest highlights were only applied to the most elevated parts of the sand dunes, making them stand out a bit from the rest of the base. And when that was done, the only thing that was left to do was to paint the sides of the base black. After NEHEBKAU had been glued down to the base, then we were done. So the only thing that is left to do is to show you the final results, which I'm gonna do. But before that, I just want to take the time and say thank you so much for watching this video. If you want to help this channel grow, please consider subscribing or give this video a thumbs up. That would mean the world to me. Thank you so much. Goodbye.